Good evening, everyone. Welcome to NTD Tonight. I'm David Zhang. Here's a preview of some of today's top stories. Former President Trump took the stand in a New York civil fraud case where the judge said he inflated his assets. Trump testified that the property valuations were too low because they didn't account for his brand and other factors. A Stanford University student injured in an alleged hit and run. Police are now investigating the case as a possible hate crime. Former President Trump takes the stand. He was the only witness testifying today in the New York civil fraud trial. The judge ruled that he and his two sons inflated the value of his assets, but Trump has his own thoughts on the matter. And we now turn to our legal correspondent, Arlene Richards, to find out what he said.
Donald Trump has completed his testimony, but not before telling the judge and the attorney general that this trial is a disgrace. He said the banks were not victims in this case because they made millions of dollars after making deals with his companies, and that the only reason why this case was ever filed is because of politics.
So while Israel is being attacked, while Ukraine is being attacked, while inflation is eating our country alive, I'm down here, and these are all political opponent attack ads by the Biden administration.
Trump repeatedly testified that the property valuations were too low because they didn't include his brand value. But the state attorney said he wasn't interested in talking about brand value. He says Trump's assets were overvalued. On Monday, he focused on estimates from 2014 that showed some values lower than the number in the final statement. When he asked the former president why, Trump said he didn't know because he didn't prepare them.
The numbers are much greater than on the financial statement. We've already proven that. They said Mar-a-Lago's worth $18 million. Mar-a-Lago's worth anywhere from probably 50 to 100 times more than that.
So why were the valuations higher in the final statement than they were in the notes? Trump said there's no such thing as overvalued. He said that a property is as valuable as the next wealthy person who buys it. For example, he said a property he owns in New York City is in a prime location, so it's more valuable than the number in the 2014 statement because two companies want to buy it, but he isn't selling it. He said those companies would be willing to pay a lot more money for the property than the value that was placed on it, and that this is just one of many methods that are used to estimate value. Numerous times, Judge Arthur Engoron threatened to rule against Trump's testimony because his responses often became narratives. For example, Trump attacked the judge and the attorney general for bringing what he called a ridiculous case.
And it's a terrible, terrible thing. These are political operatives that I'm going to be dealing with right now. You have a racist attorney general who made some terrible statements, and you see some more that came over the wires today. It's a very sad situation for our country. We shouldn't have this.
The state attorney wrapped up his questioning before the end of the day. He plans to call Trump's daughter Ivanka to the stand on Wednesday. Arlene Richards, NTD News.
Now let's take a look at other top national headlines today. New election polls show Trump leading by substantial margins in nearly all battleground states. Between 60 and 70% in those key states said the country is headed in the wrong direction. That includes the majority of voters from every racial, gender, education, and income class. The poll conducted by New York Times and Siena College paints a dire portrait for Biden in practically every swing state that led to him winning the presidency in 2020. Trump is up by 11% in Nevada, 6% in Georgia, 5% in Arizona and Michigan, and 4% in Pennsylvania. In the other battleground state, Wisconsin, the former president is down 2%, just outside the 1.8% margin of error. Secretary of State Antony Blinken wrapped up a grueling Middle East tour in Turkey this morning. Blinken met with the Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas after meeting with other key Middle Eastern leaders in Jordan over the weekend. He did not call for a ceasefire despite pressure from Arab groups. Here's what the Secretary of State said before leaving Turkey.
We remain very focused on the hostages held by Hamas, including Americans, in making sure we're doing everything possible to bring them home. We've engaged the Israelis on steps that they can take to minimize civilian casualties. We're working, as I said, very aggressively on getting more humanitarian assistance into Gaza. We don't obviously agree on everything, but there are common views on some of the imperatives of the moment that we're working on together.
Congressman Mike Gallagher is now making the case that young people are supporting Hamas because of TikTok. Gallagher says the U.S. should completely ban the Chinese platform. He cited a poll which says that over half of college-aged Americans say Hamas attacks on Israel on October 7th were justified. Gallagher wrote that a growing number of Americans rely on TikTok for their news. Today, TikTok is the top search engine for more than half of Gen Z. Official numbers from TikTok show that posts with the hashtag Free Palestine are getting around 17 times more views than posts with the hashtag Stand With Israel. Jake Denton from Heritage Foundation warns that if Congress doesn't take the necessary steps, it could have a long-lasting impact on the United States, being shaped by information coming from the Chinese Communist Party. Also, a new study shows sensitive personal information of U.S. military personnel is for sale online. The study was published Monday by Duke University researchers. It found that the data of thousands of active duty U.S. military personnel can be bought from so-called data brokers for as little as 12 cents a service member with no background checks required. Senator Ron Wyden called the study, quote, a sobering wake-up call for policymakers that the data broker industry is out of control and poses a serious threat to the U.S. national security. For detailed coverage of these stories, please visit NTD.com. An alleged hit and run on a California university campus. Law enforcement has opened a hate crime investigation, but some students are skeptical of the victim's story. NTD's David Lamb visits the campus to hear more.
Tensions rise in university campuses. Here at Stanford, we have a group supporting Israel. On the other side, a group supporting Palestinians. And some students feel that they're threatened and harassed after demonstrating. And unfortunately, one student was involved in a hit-and-run incident, and some are calling it a hate crime.
Authorities opened a hate crime investigation after an Arab Muslim student was hit while walking. The private university says the incident was reported to police before 2 p.m. Friday. According to Stanford, the victim said the driver made eye contact with the victim, accelerated and struck the victim, and then drove away while shouting expletive "you people." The suspect is described as a, quote, white male in his mid-20s with short, dirty blonde hair and a short beard, and drove a black SUV. The victim, Abdul Wahab Omira, said, my hope is to ignite a spark of empathy, a desire for change, and a call to action to foster a society where love overpowers hate. A student said that Omira is not involved in the campus Palestinian demonstration, but he visited the victim in the hospital, saying he was in physical pain.
Unfortunately, it wasn't something that was coming completely out of the blue, because as students we were already concerned about our safety. People calling us terrorists, people saying, oh, we'll report you guys to the FBI because you support terrorism. I'm the first to condemn Hamas when they do something wrong. What is right is right, and what is wrong is wrong.
However, as for the hit and run, the Stanford Review reports that the victim is referred to as a pathological liar by students who know the victim and concerned that the story could be fabricated.
Personally, I feel pretty safe, but I can only speak as like an Asian male on the campus.
Upon receiving the campus hit-and-run email, one student told us she was shocked, and students condemned the reckless behavior. CHP is currently investigating. In Stanford, California, David Lamb, NTD News.
A guaranteed monthly income to former foster youth is what a new pilot program in California will be providing to 300 recipients. This is the first state-funded program of its kind for the Golden State. Jason Blair is joining me now to tell us more. So Jason, we have heard about this universal basic or guaranteed income program before. Basically, it's just a form of welfare providing free money to qualified individuals with no strings attached. So what is the latest?
Gavin Newsom's office announced on Friday that it's starting 2 new pilot programs aimed to help former foster youth. Now, these programs will involve 300 people. 150 in Ventura County will be getting $1,000 a month, and 150 people in San Francisco will be getting $1,200 a month. Now, the money is unconditional. They can use it on anything they want, and the program is set to last for 18 months. And Newsom's office also said that the program is aimed to disrupt poverty, advance equity, and support the basic needs of the recipients and help the foster youth transition into independent adulthood.
In the past, cities like Oakland and Stockton have experimented with similar programs, but they were all privately funded. But this time you're saying the state is footing the bill with the taxpayer money?
Yes, there have been very similar programs, one in Santa Clara County where they also gave money to former foster youth. That was in 2020. And another one in 2019 in Stockton, California, where they gave 125 randomly selected people $500 a month for 2 years. Now, after the program was over, the organizers said they found it helped the recipients reduce depression and anxiety, as well as find full-time jobs. However, there were people that argued that the results weren't very conclusive, and opponents also argued that they wonder, how the state's going to come up with the money for future programs. Now, the state also announced on Friday that it is going to do 5 more similar programs resolved on universal basic income, starting as early as this fall and into early 2024.
Thank you so much, Jason. We'll take a short break now, everybody, but here's a look at what we have for you when we come back. The man who allegedly killed rapper Tupac pleads not guilty. And California's city of Oakland honors the late rapper with a street renamed after him. Some major cities considering a ban on right turns on red. Stay tuned for more on why and the traffic regulations' origin. Lots of notable plays in the NFL this past weekend. Performances from Minnesota and Texas teams stood out above the crowd. Those stories and more coming up on NTD Tonight. Welcome back to NTD Tonight. I'm your host, David Zhang. The man who allegedly killed a well-known rapper pleaded not guilty in a Las Vegas court on Thursday. He has another hearing next week.
A former gang member charged in the 1996 murder of hip-hop star Tupac Shakur pleaded not guilty on November 2nd in Las Vegas court. 60-year-old Dwayne Keefe D. Davis responded not guilty when Clark County District Judge Tiara Jones asked if he wanted to enter a plea. Police have long suspected him of the murder as he began implicating himself in a series of public statements in recent years.
Sir, are you familiar with the one charge that you're facing?
Yes, ma'am.
Do you understand that charge?
Yes, ma'am.
As to that charge, how do you plead, guilty or not guilty?
Not guilty.
Davis was charged with 1 count of murder with a deadly weapon for his alleged role in leading a group of men to kill Shakur in a drive-by shooting near the Las Vegas Strip. Davis was indicted in September by a Clark County grand jury and arrested in Las Vegas for Shakur's death. It was a long unsolved crime that became a defining moment in the history of rap music. Shakur, widely regarded as one of rap music's greatest artists, was also one of its most commercially successful, selling more than 75 million records worldwide. Davis is scheduled for another court hearing for a status check on November 7th. Meanwhile, a street in Oakland was renamed on November 3rd to commemorate Shakur after a unanimous vote by the city council. A stretch of MacArthur Boulevard by Lake Merritt, where Shakur once lived, will keep its existing name, but also be named Tupac Shakur Way.
So Tupac Shakur Way, let it be better than Martin Luther King boulevards around the country. Please, let his spirit live on the rest of these years under these streets and in your hearts and in the way that you walk and in the way that you stand. You listen to his music, you really love my brother, live like you do. Let him live through you.
So from December all the way until that night in Vegas,
Every day or every other day I was with Pac. We made plans. We strategized. I even strategized that last night. I strategized 2 or 3 days before them. I told them how we need to go to Vegas.
Commemorative plaques and signs signaling the change were paid for by the Tupac Shakur Foundation.
Health officials in California are urging individuals who have visited a Bay Area casino in the last 5 years to get tested for TB. NTD's Stephanie Secal has the details.
11 confirmed cases linked to casino staff and visitors at the California Grand Casino in Pacheco, about 25 miles northeast of Oakland. Contra Costa Health made this recommendation after discovering that 10 of the 11 cases have a genetic connection, but the source of transmission within the casino remains unknown. Officials say testing is important, given that tuberculosis can remain within a person's body without symptoms for an extended period of time. Symptoms include a persistent cough, unexplained weight loss, night sweats, and fatigue. Despite the lack of prior notification, some casino patrons have not been discouraged from visiting. Stephanie Secal, NTD News, California.
Some U.S. metropolitan cities are looking to ban right turns on red, citing an increase in pedestrian deaths. But critics say right turns on red are not to blame. Let's take a look.
More and more U.S. cities are thinking about banning right turns at a red light as there are more reports of pedestrian deaths. San Francisco leaders recently voted to urge their transportation agency to ban right on red across the city. Other major cities such as Los Angeles, Seattle, and Denver are considering similar bans. Luke Bornheimer, a San Francisco resident, started the letter campaign about a month ago. The letter states, implementing no turn on red increases safety for people crossing the street, especially children, families, seniors, and people living with disabilities, as well as people on bikes and scooters. Critics argue that banning right on red will not only inconvenience motorists, but also slow down commuter buses and deliveries. Jay Bieber, Executive Policy Director at the National Motorists Association, called it a fallacy to assume such blanket bans would make streets safer. His advocacy organization for drivers has an upcoming study that analyzes California crash data from 2011 to 2019 and finds that drivers turning right on red accounted for only about 1 pedestrian death and less than 1 bicyclist death statewide every 2 years. Safety advocates counter that official crash reports are often mislabeled. According to a national report by the Governor's Highway Safety Association, more than 7,500 people walking were struck and killed by automobiles in 2022, the highest number since 1981. That number includes all accidents, not just those involving right turns on red. The spike was attributed in part to an increase in larger vehicles such as SUVs and pickup trucks on the road. However, there are no recent nationwide studies on how many people are hurt or killed by right-turning drivers. Right on red became common following a federal law passed in 1973 in response to a fuel shortage at the time. Federal officials only provided funding for land-related projects to a state if it allowed cars to turn right on red except in specific, clearly marked areas. Most of New York City has never allowed such turns, and last year, Washington, D.C. approved a right-on-red ban that takes effect in 2025.
Disney is undergoing significant changes, with its latest being the appointment of a new CFO. NTD's Christina Corona has more on the story.
The Walt Disney Company appointed Hugh Johnston, a 34-year-old PepsiCo veteran, as its new chief financial officer, replacing Kevin Lansbury, which will be effective on December 4th. Johnston has served as PepsiCo's CFO since 2010. He also has a background as Merck & Co. CFO from 1999 to 2002. Johnston also serves as a member of the boards of both Microsoft and HCA Healthcare. Johnston will report to Disney CEO Bob Iger. Iger said Hugh's well-earned reputation as one of the best CFOs in America and his wealth of leadership experience in both financial and operational roles, overseeing a diverse portfolio of top global brands, make him a perfect addition to Disney's senior leadership team. Christina Corona, NTD News, California.
Now for some sports with the NTD's Carlos Reyes. Carlos, there were some very close NFL games this weekend. Can you walk us through some of the highlights?
Yeah, well, David, right off the bat, I can say the Minnesota Vikings definitely surprised me yesterday. We always talk about how important it is for a quarterback to be able to manage difficult situations and be able to win their team games. Well, veteran quarterback Joshua Dobbs did exactly that. We're talking about a man that was traded at the deadline in order to provide some much-needed depth at the quarterback position for the Vikings due to Kirk Cousins' season-ending injury. He arrived in Minnesota last Wednesday and was literally on the sideline yesterday, practicing his cadence with his offensive line for the first time as a Viking before having to replace a concussed Jaren Hall. I mean, this man didn't even know his teammates' names heading into the game. What followed was nothing short of spectacular, 20 for 30 on pass attempts for 158 yards and 2 touchdowns, including the game-winning touchdown. But that wasn't it. He was also amazing on the ground, rushing for 66 yards and a touchdown to top it off. The Vikings receiving corps has been playing lights out despite Justin Jefferson being sidelined due to injury. Players like TJ Hawkinson and Jordan Addison have been playing sensationally amidst the all-pro receiver's absence.
So you just talked about NFC. What's happening in the AFC world?
Well, I have to say I'm definitely impressed with what DeMeco Ryans is doing with this Texans team. We're reaching the halfway point of the season, and they're already surpassed last year's wins total. They faced a very tough Tampa Bay at home and were able to get the job done thanks to their rookie sensation at quarterback. C.J. Stroud is hands down the front-runner in the Offensive Rookie of the Year race, with no one remotely close to competing besides maybe Jordan Addison, in my opinion. But I mean, just look at yesterday's stats. 30 for 42 on pass attempts for 470 yards and 5 touchdowns. That's just insane.
Thank you so much, Carlos.
Thank you, David. No problem.
All right, that's all we've got for you tonight. We would like you to join us again on NTD Tonight every weekday at 9 p.m. I'm David Zhang. Have a wonderful evening.